I still remember the day when everything we knew about human ancestors was turned completely upside down. It was an autumn morning in 2010 when I was working in the laboratory at the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig, Germany. The ancient DNA samples we had just analyzed didn't just change science's view of Neanderthals. They completely transformed the story of ourselves, Homo sapiens. Today, I'm going to tell you this dramatic story, a story I witnessed and participated in firsthand. This isn't just an ordinary scientific discovery. It's a complete revolution in how we understand ourselves and our origins. My name is David, and I've spent 25 years of my life studying ancient genetics. But nothing in my career could have prepared me for what we were about to discover. To understand why this discovery was so important, I need to take you back to before we knew the truth. For over 150 years, since the first Neanderthal fossil was found in the Neander Valley in 1856, we had a very specific image of them. I still remember those first lectures when I was a student. My professor described Neanderthals as our brutish cousins, hunched creatures with shaggy hair, low foreheads, and most importantly, completely extinct when our Homo sapiens ancestors migrated to Europe about 40,000 years ago. But even then, I felt something wasn't right. During my first fieldwork in Spain, I had the opportunity to directly observe the traces Neanderthals left behind, and what I saw wasn't evidence of primitive creatures. At El Cidrón Cave, I witnessed stone tools crafted with astounding sophistication. Sharp blades shaped from flint, scrapers with perfect ergonomic design for processing animal hides. These weren't products of crude intelligence, but the most impressive thing I ever witnessed was at Shanidar Cave in Iraq. Here, we found evidence of ritualistic burial. A Neanderthal had been carefully buried, surrounded by wildflowers. When we analyzed the remaining pollen, we discovered these flowers didn't grow naturally in the cave. Someone had deliberately placed them there. Imagine that scene 50,000 years ago. A group of Neanderthals grieving the loss of a family member. They didn't simply discard the body like animals. They took time and effort to prepare a solemn ceremony. They went to collect the most beautiful flowers, then decorated around the deceased. This was an expression of love, respect, and spiritual meaning. And that was just the beginning. At Brunicle Cave in France, we discovered strange structures made from broken stalactites, perfect circles arranged in a pattern that seemed to have some meaning. When we dated them, the result shocked us all, 176,000 years old. This was one of the earliest evidence of symbolic behavior in humans. But perhaps the most impressive discovery I ever witnessed was at Gorham's Cave in Gibraltar. Here, on the cave wall, we found carved lines forming diamond shapes. The lines were carefully carved, calculated. These weren't random scratches, but intentional artwork. Neanderthals had created art. All these discoveries made me doubt conventional views. But to truly understand Neanderthals, we needed to look inside, at their very DNA. And that's where the real revolution began. In 2006, I was invited to join the most ambitious project in archaeological history, completely sequencing the Neanderthal genome. This project was led by Svante Pääbo, a genius in the field of ancient genetics. Those early days were truly nightmarish. DNA from fossils tens of thousands of years old is usually degraded into tiny fragments. Imagine trying to reassemble a book that's been torn into millions of small pieces, with most pieces lost or damaged. That was exactly the challenge we faced. But we had a breakthrough. From Vindija Cave in Croatia, we obtained bone samples with exceptionally good DNA quality. I still remember the excitement when the first DNA sequences were decoded. Each nucleotide identified was a step closer to understanding the true nature of Neanderthals. This process took 3 years. 3 years of non-stop work, with sleepless nights in the laboratory, heartbreaking failures, and moments of wanting to give up. But in spring 2010, we finally had the first complete genome map of a Neanderthal. And that's when everything changed. When we compared Neanderthal DNA with modern human DNA, we expected to see 2 completely separate lineages. That's what all previous theories had predicted. Neanderthals and Homo sapiens were supposed to be different species that had evolved independently for hundreds of thousands of years. But the results were completely opposite. I still remember that afternoon when Svante called us all into the meeting room. On the computer screen were complex charts, but the message was very clear. In the DNA of every modern European and Asian person, about 1 to 4% was Neanderthal DNA. The meeting room was silent for several minutes. We all understood the significance of this discovery. Neanderthals hadn't completely gone extinct. They were still living within us. What did this mean? It meant our ancestors hadn't just lived alongside Neanderthals. They had married them, had children with them. These children survived and passed Neanderthal genes to subsequent generations. But this discovery was just the beginning. When we analyzed deeper, we found that the Neanderthal genes within us weren't useless remnants. Many of them actually had important functions. The discovery of Neanderthal DNA in modern humans was just the beginning of an even more amazing journey of discovery. We soon realized these genes weren't just old baggage from the past. They were actively influencing our lives today. One of the first and most shocking discoveries I participated in researching was related to the immune system. When we analyzed immunity-related genes in modern Europeans, we found that a significant proportion of these genes originated from Neanderthals. Think about this concretely. When our Homo sapiens ancestors migrated from Africa to Europe about 50,000 years ago, they encountered a completely new environment with bacteria, viruses, and parasites their immune systems had never encountered. But Neanderthals had lived in Europe for hundreds of thousands of years. Their immune systems had perfectly adapted to this environment. When these two species met and had children together, the hybrid offspring inherited immune advantages from both lineages. This is why many Neanderthal immune genes still exist in us today. They helped our ancestors survive in a dangerous world. I remember researching the HLA genes, an important group of genes for recognizing pathogens. When we traced the origin of a particular HLA-B variant that was especially effective against hepatitis B, we discovered it originated from Neanderthals. This gene is now present in about 21% of the Asian population. But Neanderthal legacy doesn't stop at the immune system. Our research also found that many physical traits of modern humans can be traced back to Neanderthals. I spent months studying the MC1R gene, the gene that determines skin and hair color. We discovered that some variants of this gene, variants that produce red hair and fair skin, originated from Neanderthals. This means when you see someone with brilliant red hair, you might be looking at a living legacy from 50,000 years ago. But perhaps the most impressive discovery I ever participated in was about the EPAS1 gene. This gene regulates how the body uses oxygen and is especially important for people living at high altitudes. When we studied Tibetans, people with extraordinary ability to live at altitudes above 4,000 meters, we found their EPAS1 gene originated from Denisovans, another ancient human species closely related to Neanderthals. This means the high-altitude survival ability of Tibetans, an ability we thought was the result of recent adaptation, was actually a gift from ancient ancestors tens of thousands of years ago. Even our psychological traits might bear traces of Neanderthals. Recent research shows that some genes related to depression, anxiety, and other psychological disorders might have Neanderthal origins. This doesn't mean Neanderthals are to blame for modern human psychological problems, but it shows that even the most complex aspects of human psychology might have roots in our deep evolutionary past. One of the longest-standing misconceptions about Neanderthals was that they were less intelligent than our Homo sapiens ancestors. But as we delved deeper into DNA research and combined it with new archaeological discoveries, a completely different picture emerged. I still remember the day we analyzed the FOXP2 gene, called the language gene, from Neanderthal DNA samples. This gene plays a crucial role in humans' ability to speak and understand language. For many years, scientists believed the modern version of FOXP2 was something only Homo sapiens had and Neanderthals lacked. But the analysis results surprised us all. Neanderthals had the same version of FOXP2 as modern humans. They had language capability. This discovery forced us to reconsider everything we knew about Neanderthal intelligence. And the deeper we researched, the more we realized they weren't just intelligent. They had complex cognitive abilities no less than modern humans. Consider their tool-making abilities. During years of working at excavation sites across Europe, I had the opportunity to study thousands of stone tools crafted by Neanderthals. What I saw wasn't the product of primitive intelligence. The Levallois technique they used required extremely complex planning and abstract thinking abilities. To create a blade using this technique, you must be able to visualize the final product in your mind before starting to craft. You must understand the internal structure of stone, know exactly where to strike, with how much force, at what angle. This skill required years of practice and very high intelligence. But even more impressive was their ability to transmit knowledge. The Levallois toolmaking technique was passed from generation to generation for hundreds of thousands of years. This could only happen if they had complex communication abilities and organized educational systems. I once had the opportunity to study a Neanderthal tool workshop at Maastricht Belvedere in the Netherlands. Here, we found evidence of a Neanderthal school. There were areas for experienced masters and other areas for apprentices. We could distinguish between masters and students' products based on the sophistication of the tools. Neanderthals' symbolic thinking ability was also demonstrated through their use of decorative materials. At many archaeological sites, we found evidence that Neanderthals used red ochre and other pigments to decorate their bodies. They also used shells, animal teeth, and precious stones to make jewelry. At Cueva de los Aviones cave in Spain, we found perforated and dyed shells from 115,000 years ago, 20,000 years before Homo sapiens appeared in Europe. This is clear evidence that Neanderthals had symbolic thinking ability from very early on. But perhaps the most impressive evidence of their intelligence was their ability to care for injured community members. At Shanidar, we found the remains of a Neanderthal who lived to 45 years old despite being blind in one eye, missing an arm, and having severe leg disabilities. In the primitive world, such people couldn't have survived without community care. This shows Neanderthals not only had intelligence, but also compassion, concepts of morality, and social responsibility. They understood that caring for the weak was the right thing to do, even when it required sacrifice from the community. The biggest question I and my colleagues faced after all these discoveries was, if Neanderthals were truly intelligent and adaptable, why did they disappear? This is a question I've spent 10 years intensively researching, and the answer turns out to be much more complex than we ever thought. Previously, the most common explanation was that Neanderthals were defeated by Homo sapiens in direct competition. According to this view, our ancestors had better technology, better social organization, and simply eliminated Neanderthals from history. But DNA evidence shows the story is much more complex. Instead of a genocidal war, what actually happened seems to have been a gradual absorption process. Genetic data shows that in areas where these two species lived together, the rate of hybrid offspring was quite high. These children not only survived, but reproduced successfully. Over time, the boundaries between the two species became increasingly blurred. But why did this process lead to Neanderthals disappearing as a distinct species? The answer lies in population scale. Our research shows that the total Neanderthal population in Europe was probably only about 10,000 to 70,000 individuals at any given time. This was a very small population, dispersed across a vast area. In contrast, when Homo sapiens began migrating to Europe, they came in much larger numbers. In this situation, even without direct conflict, Neanderthal genes could still be diluted over generations. Each time a Neanderthal married a Homo sapiens, their children would only carry 50% Neanderthal genes. And when these children married Homo sapiens again, the Neanderthal gene percentage would drop to 25%. But there's another factor I believe played an important role: climate change. About 40,000 years ago, Europe was experiencing a period of intense climate change. Successive ice ages completely altered the ecosystem that Neanderthals had adapted to for hundreds of thousands of years. Neanderthals had evolved to adapt to Europe's cold environment. Their large, muscular bodies helped them retain heat in harsh conditions. But when climate changed, this advantage could become a disadvantage. Large bodies require more energy, and during times of food scarcity, this could become a burden. I also believe mobility played an important role. Homo sapiens had strong nomadic traditions. They could quickly move to new areas when the environment changed. Neanderthals, while also mobile, seemed more attached to specific territories. When traditional food sources disappeared due to climate change, Homo sapiens could quickly adapt by moving to new lands. Neanderthals, with their deep territorial attachments, may have had more difficulty adapting to these changes. But perhaps most important was social group size. Archaeological evidence shows Neanderthals typically lived in small groups of about 10 to 15 individuals. Homo sapiens, conversely, could organize into larger groups, sometimes up to hundreds of people. During crisis periods, group size could determine survival. A large group could share resources better, care for the sick more effectively, and have more opportunities to find solutions to new problems. When disease or natural disaster struck, a small group might be completely wiped out, while a large group could still survive. When I look back at this entire research journey, from the early days of doubting conventional views to the breakthrough DNA discoveries, I realize the story of Neanderthals isn't just about the past. It carries profound lessons for us today. First, the discovery about Neanderthals has completely changed how we understand human nature. We are not the product of a linear evolutionary process from primitive to civilized. We are the result of a complex network of ancient human species, each contributing to our genetic and cultural diversity today. This has profound implications for how we view human diversity. When we understand that each of us carries within ourselves heritage from many different ancient human species, the concept of racial purity becomes meaningless. We are all hybrid products, and that is precisely our source of strength. Second, the story of Neanderthal disappearance warns us about the dangers humanity faces today. Climate change, habitat fragmentation, and ecological disasters, all the challenges Neanderthals faced, are also threatening us today. But we also have advantages Neanderthals didn't have. We have global communication capabilities, can share knowledge at unprecedented speed, and cooperate on a planetary scale. If we use these advantages wisely, we can avoid the fate of Neanderthals. Third, Neanderthal research has shown us the importance of genetic diversity. The Neanderthal genes within us aren't impurities, but precious gifts that help us adapt to our environment. In the future, when we face new challenges, from new pandemics to space exploration, this genetic diversity could be key to survival. Finally, the Neanderthal story reminds us of the value of scientific humility. For 150 years, we had a mistaken image of Neanderthals, seeing them as inferior beings. Only when we truly listened to what scientific evidence was telling us did we discover the amazing truth. Today, when I stand in the laboratory looking at DNA samples being analyzed, I know this journey of discovery isn't over. Every day, we discover new things about our ancestors. Perhaps in the near future, we'll discover other ancient human species we never knew existed. But one thing I'm certain of, Neanderthals never truly disappeared. They still live in our blood, in our genes, in the very essence of our humanity. Every time we show compassion to the weak, every time we create art, every time we display intelligence and creativity, perhaps that's also an echo from our Neanderthal ancestors. The discovery about Neanderthals has forever changed how we understand ourselves. We are not the pinnacle of evolution, but part of a complex and beautiful story about human diversity. And in this increasingly divided world, perhaps this is the most important lesson Neanderthals can teach us. We all share common origins. We are all family. Thank you for following this amazing journey of discovery. If this video has changed how you view humanity and our history, please like and subscribe to support science stories like this. And remember, every time you look in the mirror, you're seeing not just a modern human, but a living legacy from tens of thousands of years of complex and wonderful evolution.